Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Jessica Turner-Scoff. I'm the Associate Director of Science Communications here at Longwood Gardens. We are so excited that you're here today to talk about such a hot topic. I couldn't resist. So today we are talking about fire for Flora, controlled burns in the meadow management. But to begin today, we're going to show a quick video just to make sure everyone is on the same page. So let us begin.
Meadows thrive on ecological disturbance, and an ecological disturbance is basically any event that totally redistributes the ecological resources in a big way. If you want to keep a meadow and you want to continue to have a meadow over a longer period of time, you have to renew it with ecological disturbance. And you can do that with fire and you can do that with mowing. Those are the two most commonly used meadow maintenance disturbance. A meadow left alone slowly becomes a forest. Each year we burn about 1/3 of the meadow garden, and we do that because it's on a 1 to 3 year rotation. We do that because we're providing habitat in the other 2/3 for the populations of species that we have across the meadow garden.
Today we are burning in the meadow garden. Our general management goals: invasive species control, promoting native flora, improving wildlife habitat, and wildland and prescribed fire training.
So firing team, let's go ahead and put your drip torches together.
In this moment in time, humanity has to answer the question of how much of the biodiversity that's with us right here in this moment are we going to take with us into the future. And so the decisions that we make at a small scale are important to that bigger global picture and what we're going to have in the future.
Well, it is my absolute joy and delight to be able to introduce the esteemed panelists that we have today. Some of them are probably familiar from their 15 minutes of fame in that video. We have starting Madison Claydon, a grower at Longwood Gardens from Coatesville who works closely with chrysanthemums. She began her journey as a seasonal employee, working her way up to part-time before joining the professional horticulture program. Through this program, she gained invaluable hands-on experience, including participating in a prescribed burn. Today, Madison is a full-time grower, and it's also her dream job. We have Erik Stefferud. This is Longwood's manager of soils and composting. A large focus of his work is all about ensuring that all garden-produced waste is ultimately transformed into high-quality finished product, such as mulch or compost. In addition, he is the leader of Longwood's prescribed fire training program, a Chester County forest fire warden, a first responder, and a wildland firefighter. And last but certainly not least, we have Kristie Lane Anderson. She is a research specialist with the Land Stewardship and Ecology team at Longwood Gardens. Her work is focused on stewardship science, restoration planning and implementation, and development of GIS systems for data collection and land analysis. Kristie is a squad boss for Longwood's Prescribed Fire program and has been burning with Longwood for 5 years. Thank you so much for being here today, everyone. We are going to jump right on in while we watch that short and excellent video. If we could just briefly reiterate what prescribed fire is, especially in regards to what we do at Longwood Gardens, and what are the goals of it. So how about we start with Kristie?
All right, can everybody hear me okay? Fabulous. So prescribed fire is a fire in natural areas that is conducted in a planned and considered way. So it is something that we are conducting as part of ecological management for our meadows. We are doing so for the ecological health of our landscape, and we're also doing so in a way that is safe for the people conducting the burn and also for the surrounding landscaping community.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Just so, like, as I mentioned in the video, as you saw, really the word prescribed fire, it's a prescription. We are doing this, for a specific reason in each one of the burn units, whether it's different vegetation management. So really, I just really want to hone in on that prescription, prescribed fire. We are doing it for a reason. We're not doing it because it's fun, although it kind of is. But there is a specific reason that we're doing it, and each area has its own goals and objectives behind why we're doing it.
When we think about why we're doing prescribed fire, it's really focusing on the ecosystem. So, thinking about how living things and non-living things are interacting in a space. I think we have the tendency to focus on individuals, but this is really a systems level approach. So, Kristie, can you take a couple seconds and just talk about the impact of prescribed fire on wildlife and plants?
Sure. So, as we said, this is an ecosystems approach. When we send fire across the landscape, it is affecting all of the organisms that are in the area that's being burned. So we use fire here especially to manage our plant communities, and we specifically use fire to manage our meadow plant communities. Meadow plant communities are dominated by warm season growing species, herbaceous plants. These are grasses and wildflowers that grow during the warm season. So the way that we conduct our burns is we will burn during the dormant season, typically in late winter, very, very early spring. And we do these burns at a time when these warm season native plants haven't emerged yet. They're still dormant. So by conducting these burns, we are burning off last year's growth, we're burning off thatch, and we are also creating better light access to the soil. And this reduces competition for these native species and can actually jumpstart them for the year that they're burned. Big blue stem, Andropogon gerardii, is one of our native warm season grasses, and it can actually grow more robustly in the year following a burn. So it really benefits these species. At the same time, we are trying to reduce the amount of woody species in our meadows because woody species put on more above ground biomass. They start to shade out these sun-loving plants, and eventually our meadows will turn into a forest. So fire doesn't affect our warm season grasses and forbs in the same way that it affects the woody species. So the prescribed burns that we do are relatively low intensity compared to a great big wildfire. So they are good at burning through the thatch and last year's material from the grasses and forbs. They're good at coming through and burning young seedlings of trees and shrubs and other species that we don't want crowding out our meadow species. It's also good at getting rid of invasive vines, such as Celastris, also called bittersweet, and honeysuckle, which are very, very difficult for us to manage in this meadow vegetation. The types of fires that we do in our meadows are not hot enough to burn through the large trees that we have in some of our areas of meadow that we want to keep because they're very lovely, provide lots of ecosystem services. which means that there will be some trees in that in-between size where we do want to get rid of them, but the fire's not hot enough to kill them off in the fire. But because it is getting rid of all the thatch and everything in that area, it makes it very easy for us then to come in after the burn and mechanically or manually remove them. So it's a management tool, and it's also a management prep tool for us. So that's kind of an overview of the plant community and how we're managing that. As you said, there are also wildlife in our plant communities. And one of the species that are very, very common in our meadows is meadow voles. These are little guys about this big. They kind of look like mice. If you've been in the meadow garden, you may have seen them scurrying across the trail. They're very abundant in our meadows. And these are species that live in underground burrows. They're very adapted to high disturbance landscapes, such as meadows. They are adapted to fire systems. So when a fire comes through, they will go into their underground burrows. They also can travel quite a distance for an animal this small. They've been found to travel up to a mile from their original location, which means that after an area has been burned and that thatch and cover is removed, it's very easy for them to move from that previously burned area into an area that is not burned, and all those habitat resources will still be available for them in those other areas. At the same time, meadow voles are an important food source for many of our native species, such as foxes and hawks, and you will actually see these species coming into a burn area within hours of the burn ending and coming to hunt, which is really amazing to see. Other things that we have in our meadow, we have rabbits. Rabbits are very, very fast. I have seen them running around during a fire. They're very, very good at escaping the fire areas. I mentioned with birds, raptors such as red-tailed hawks have actually been seen to be attracted to fire because when they see disturbance happening, they know it's an opportunity for them to hunt. I've also seen this when we're mowing meadows. Oftentimes they will perch in a tree above us and wait for an opportunity to hunt something that was flushed out by the disturbance. The other thing that's just really interesting to see after a fire is it kind of reveals the habitat to us. So if we go out to an area that's been burned through, you can see the trails and the tracks that the meadow voles have created. You can see deer tracks in the area. You can also find old bones and skulls, and you can really see the cycle of life in all its parts.
Thank you, thank you. What I really took away from that is it's like a refresh, just like, hitting the refresh on the computer, hitting the refresh on the ecosystem. Now we have all of this area that we do burn, and then area that we don't burn. So how do we prioritize what direction we do?
Yeah. You want to start with this one?
So to start with that, commonly in the meadow garden, we try to burn about 1/3 of it. That way we're not removing all the, vegetation, all the, safe space for all the wildlife. So we make sure that we only burn part of it in any given year. Most of the burn units that we call them, we have about a 3 to 5 year rotation where we'll try to get to all of them and do, 1 or 2 every other year kind of thing. And so that's kind of the rotation that we go. And then, as Kristie mentioned, the different vegetation that might be in there. So depending on whether it's a north-facing slope, south-facing slope, different other environmental considerations, there could be a different variety of species, specifically exotic, invasive species that we're looking to target to remove. So we try to prioritize some of the areas that have a higher density of exotic invasive species, and then we tend to leave alone some of the areas that have less infestations of exotic species. And similarly, like Kristie said, with the woody species that are encroaching in the meadow as well, we'll target some of the areas that have a little bit higher of that woody encroachment so that we can remove those to maintain the meadow system.
Yeah, as Erik said, this is a prescription for the landscape. So we're looking at all of our meadows, we're looking at our landscapes, we're looking at the species composition, the structure, and choosing when is the right time to burn. So with invasive species, there are some invasive species that are well managed by fire, especially woody species. There are other invasive species that may be evolved with fire in their home landscapes. And it would be a bad idea to send fire through that landscape before we've had a chance to tackle it with other tools in our land stewardship toolbox. So it's a multifaceted approach.
Working with fire, it's a very intense experience, I'm sure, and they don't just let anyone do this. So I was hoping that, maybe Madison, you could start off talking about the specific skills and certifications that were required. What was all the training like?
So we did about 30 hours of different online courses. I think there were 4 in total, and they just kind of teach you a lot about how to work as a team. Obviously, you can't do a burn on your own, so it teaches you the chain of command. It also teaches you, how fire works. It's a really great opportunity because you can go from knowing nothing to becoming knowledgeable enough to participate in a burn. So, how fire works, how it moves, how different factors influence it, and how to use different tools. So on top of those 30 hours of online courses, there's also an 8-hour day where it's led by the wonderful land stewardship team and the fire team. And you do a work capacity test, which is you have to walk a mile in 15 minutes, just to make sure you're physically able to get the job done.
And are you in all your gear with that?
You are not. There's a different test where you are, but this one was just a regular walk. And then you go through kind of like learning the site and the different operations that will be taking place that day.
Very cool. And what's it like to teach this?
So it's been a lot of fun the last handful of years. I've been certified to teach this field day training class for 3 years now. And it's been a wild riding experience getting to the qualifications to be able to teach this type of class. So personally, nationally qualified as an incident commander type 5. So it means I'm a single resource. I'm a squad boss of a specific level. So as Madison mentioned, the basic coursework that involved the field day class to bring together all the online coursework that you have. And then there's also like advanced trainings you can take in different firing techniques, using pumps, and even getting into the wildfire world, different things like how to communicate and work with helicopters, how to use and communicate with dozers and creating fire line in different ways like that, and then multiple different levels of fire behavior, learning how the weather affects fire, whether it's a head fire or backing fire, things like that, and then smoke dispersion. So there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of tailor your own training into the avenue that you want to take with it, whether it's in heavy equipment or aircraft or in firing operations, and so there's quite a lot of training that can be taken if you want to keep going through the ranks and keep going up.
Excellent. Now, thinking about the fact that you went through this process with the professional horticulture program, and the picture that we're showing, I think it was 14 different students and interns were part of this. I mean, that's amazing. That's incredible. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what impact did this process have on you and your fellow students?
Oh, it was amazing, in every meaning of the word. On a very basic level, it's just cool watching your friends do cool things. But there's also the very 38 hours of training, and you're finally putting it all together and getting to work on the team, and everyone plays such a vital part. There is no bystander. You're doing something. I was lucky enough, I worked with Ellen, so I got to put down a wet line, which is just spraying water on the ground, but we got to circle the fire and kind of watch it move inward. So yeah, it was a fantastic experience that I think I'll remember forever.
And so speaking of that experience, how did that influence your perspective on horticulture? I mean, now you're a grower. What have you taken from the experience of the fire and applied it to what you do now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways. One way to look at it is fire is a IPM strategy, which is integrated pest management, and I currently work in the greenhouses, so there's a lot of integrated pest management to keep my crops healthy. But bigger picture, I feel like sometimes we look at things as humans as black or white. It's either good and it doesn't make me uncomfortable, or it makes me uncomfortable and it's bad. And sometimes we see fire as oh, that's not good, that's scary. And being part of this team and doing all the training and being part of the burn taught me that, it's not bad at all. It's a very necessary tool. And so the impact on horticulture is now I look in everything in horticulture that I think is weird or makes me uncomfortable. And I go, well, what is the silver lining here? What is good about this? Yeah.
That's so just like a complete perspective shift with
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Another refresh.
Exactly. Yeah, it really was.
Now, what are the key safety precautions? Again, this is something, there's a lot of training, there's a lot of effort that goes into this planning. What do we what steps do we take before the actual burn, and how do you ensure that the team stays safe? Because safety is, of course, number one.
So as we mentioned, this is prescribed fire. It's a prescription for the landscape. So the planning process truly does start in the fall. Before we even think about, putting fire on the ground in the spring, we're starting to plan this in the fall. We have to submit a prescribed fire burn plan to the state, for, technical review. And so we're submitting this burn plan for the intended units in the spring, probably by the end of December, early January or so. And so we have, it's, pretty close to like a 45, 50-page document that goes through everything from the amount of staffing required to do a specific burn unit based on its size, topography, complexity, things like that. And then we'll start to tactically plan where do we need fire breaks, where do we need to make fire breaks bigger based on the vegetation type, the predicted flame length, and a whole wide variety of different variables like that. So it really, there's a lot that goes into the burn on the day of, and we are all, very strict and adamant about maintaining everybody's safety, but the safety really starts months before when we start planning the burn. And by planning the burn, when we walk the burn units and kind of look at the space, we start looking for those hazards. And by looking for those hazards, we can begin to mitigate those hazards. And even just by identifying the hazards, we can already start to mitigate them by being aware of them. And so having a crew of people go out and walk the burn units months before we even think about burning, we're able to start mitigating those hazards months ahead of time so that we can implement a safe burn on the day of.
Kristie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Sure. So, as Erik said, the vast majority of the safety planning that we do happens before the burn. During the burn itself, so I am a squad boss on our team, which means during the day of the burn, I am overseeing a group of people who are helping with holding, so helping make sure that the fire stays within the contained area. And a lot of times the people I'm overseeing have never done this before. They're very new to it, and oftentimes it can be a very scary situation if they've never been that close to a big fire before. So oftentimes what I'm focused on is their well-being, making sure that they're hydrating, because that's very easy to forget. Making sure that they feel comfortable, making sure that if they're have been working in an area that's really active, and someone at the other end of the line hasn't seen any flames for the last 20 minutes, I might swap those two people. Give them a chance to move around and have different experiences, and also a chance to work really actively and a chance to rest. And also something I've learned is like exuding calm. When I first became a squad boss, I was like, oh my God, I'm in charge of all these people. And they've never done this before. It was very intimidating. But something I learned from watching Erik is, there's nothing more calming than watching an experienced person walk around a burn unit and just be chill. So exuding that feeling to them helps everyone stay calm, stay focused, and work together. Yeah.
Just as Kristie was talking there, just one of the things that, her working as a squad boss, we have another individual qualified as a squad boss, and then myself as the, firing team leader. It's active communication. By communicating, we have a slew of radios across the entirety of all of our staff working the burn, and it's the communication which, having everybody that's working this entire space be aware of everything that's going on at one time. We're not making phone calls, leaving information out because we don't want somebody else to hear it. Even if you might not be talking on the radio, we still want everybody to be able to hear what's going on in different parts of the fire. And even as I'm working with the rest of the firing team, I want everybody on the holding resources side to understand, where I'm, strategically putting more fire on the ground, in areas where I might not be putting as much fire on the ground, areas where I'm implementing a backing fire that's a little bit lower intensity, and then some of the areas that I might be putting a little bit of head fire into the burn unit just to make sure that we have a little bit more fire intensity. So just to reiterate, active communication throughout the entire process. We're not a group of individuals out here making decisions. We're all part of a team, like Madison said.
Well, and as Associate Director of Science Communications, I will argue that communications, absolutely, very big priority. All right, let's talk gear, personal protective equipment, and you all in the audience are in for a treat today. Let's introduce Jack Lyle. Jack Lyle, will you come on down, please? Jack Lyle is a recent graduate of Purdue University holding a BS in environmental engineering. For the last 9 months, Jack has served as the year-long land stewardship and ecology intern, helping collect and analyze field data, as well as manage Longwood's natural lands and participating in prescribed burns. Erik, would you like to walk us through everything that Jack is wearing?
So as you can see our model here, Jack, I'm going to start from the ground up. So first things first, we start with a sturdy pair of leather boots. We want to make sure that there is limited or almost no synthetic material, because as you can imagine, if we're working in a fire system, synthetic material might melt. So we want sturdy, natural leather boots. Sometimes those boots end up having their soles screwed into place rather than having them stitched into place, just in case the stitches might burn and come out. But as we get into his greens and his yellows here, this is actually a Nomex, which is a fire-resistant material. It doesn't exactly offer as much protection from heat as it's fire-resistant, that it doesn't ignite unless it gets to a pretty extreme temperature. If Jack were to be in a situation where that Nomex were to ignite, he would be in a pretty bad situation. But you can almost walk right through the flames, and that stuff will pretty much be totally okay. In his hand there, he's holding a Dragon Fur is the brand jacket. It's also a Nomex fleece. As you can imagine, we do burn. We burned the other week. It was middle, end of February there. And so it's just a way for us to keep warm on some cold days, but it is also a Nomex type material. As we're going up a little bit more, obviously, hard hat, required PPE for us to be on the burn. He has a little bit of a Nomex neck shroud that he can deploy and put in front of his face if things seem to like they're getting a little too warm. He has his safety glasses on, which is required at all times, and he also has his sturdy leather work gloves. Similar to the boots, we want to make sure that we have a sturdy pair of leather gloves that can't melt if you're holding a stick or some embers or anything like that. And then you can see his fancy shoulder straps there. Jack, if you can give me a twirl. He has what we call like line gear, and so this is a bit of a smaller version, but it has a spot where you can put water. It has a spot you can put snacks, extra gloves, anything that you might need while working a prescribed fire specifically. As you can see up here in the front of the room, this would be the line gear bag that I would use when I'm going wildland firefighting, where I need to be self-sufficient for up to like 16 hours. So like that's where I'll carry a gallon and a half of water and a giant bag sack lunch, so that I can work out in the field for that amount of period of time. But the size line gear that Jack has on right now is perfectly fine for the couple of hours of work that we might do at any given point while we're doing prescribed fire stuff. So just a little bit of the difference between why there's smaller ones and why there's larger ones, really just to fit what you need for the job.
Thank you, Jack and Erik. Jack, you're a natural. Yeah, everyone give him a round of applause. And, at the end of today, you can come up and take a look at some of Erik's equipment. And, of course, all of the panelists will be available to talk and ask questions to as well. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground. But let's talk a little bit about the past. How has the prescribed fire program really evolved over time? What has changed from how we started doing this to where we are now?
So I would have to say the largest thing that has changed in the program since I've been with Longwood for 12 years now. I've been burning here at Longwood for 9 years, I think. And I would say the biggest thing that has changed that has really improved the amount of safety that we're able to do in the burn is by having student support. We have, on any given year, between 8 or 10 Longwood full-time staff members that are fully trained to do the burns. But within the last handful of years, we've been able to get a lot of the students and interns trained up. And by getting 8, 10, 15 students trained on an annual basis, we've essentially been able to double our ranks. And so by having more people, more boots on the ground, making sure that the fire stays in the box. It's just been a great way for us to be able to expand the program, to be able to burn more acres at a given time, to be able to tackle more burn units by having more staff that we can tap from. And then just as we kind of go through the program, every year Kristie and I sit down after the burns and we talk about, man, I think we really could have used a couple more of those neck shrouds, or we could have used some more hard hats, and some of the gear that we have. We bought a new water tank a handful of years ago so that we can use 3 water tanks on the burn burn instead of using 2 water tanks on the burn. So we've, over the course of my time here, we've just had the opportunity to really build out the staffing, but then also build out the equipment and tailor some of the equipment specific to what we need to do here on the burn. And we have lists upon lists upon lists of all the different things that we need to make sure we remember to bring with us so that we don't forget anything the next time. Do you have anything to add?
Sure. Yeah, I think the fact that we have done it so many times that we make sure to check in with each other every year after the burn is, we make it just that much better every year. For myself and my colleague Ryan Pardue, we really liked the burn program. We were really interested in taking more of a leadership role in the burn program. And so with Erik's guidance, and Longwood support, we were able to do further training, to take more of a leadership position in our prescribed fire program. And I think that is really that investment in our staff and our training and our building expertise over time has made it more robust program and ultimately a safer burn to work on.
And we recently had a burn, correct? So if people would like to see what that looks like, they can go to the Meadow Garden and also come back multiple times, see how it changes over time. Now, let's have a little bit of a discussion about what's the one misconception you wish you could correct regarding fire as a tool in ecosystem management. I know Madison did a great job talking about earlier of like black and white, it's not like that. But yeah, I would love to hear what you think, Kristie.
Sure. So for me, it's that fire it's going to work differently in different ecosystems. Fire is not a cure-all, fire is not a panacea. Fire does not do the same thing in all landscapes at all times of year. It is one of the tools in our toolbox as land stewards. It's a very important tool in our toolbox. But it's important, in our fire planning, all the things that we've been talking about, ultimately to have success in a burn, ecologically speaking, we have to know our own landscapes. And we have to know what effects we want to see from the fire. And during the burn, we can often tailor how much fire we're putting on the ground based on the effects that we want to see. And so knowing your landscape, knowing your plant community, and knowing the targets that you want to achieve, that's how you can have a more successful burn.
And the thing that I like to kind of talk about specifically here, we are burning in southeastern Pennsylvania. A lot of people don't really see prescribed fire or wildfire in this region, but prescribed fire and wildfires are very common throughout Pennsylvania. There's certainly a robust history of fire on this specific landscape here a millennia ago, which is why our native species are so adapted to it. It may not be all that common anymore, but it is something that our native species, native animals are adapted to, and so I just like to remind and tell folks that this is something that used to happen here a very long time ago, and it was a natural part of the landscape to burn probably every 7 to 10 years, and so we are trying to recreate that to help promote ecological landscapes.
Yeah, and before I moved to this area, I was living in the Midwest and working with gardens out there, and that was a common management prescribed fire, but it was for forests. So it's cool that this is something that kind of spans regions, but it's done for different goals, which I think is a really cool thing about this. Now, Madison, regarding the last burn that you participated with, what made it successful in your perspective?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to define success. I can say I'm not an ecologist like Kristie here, so it's hard to determine how that was successful in that sense, but knowing that we did everything safely, most important, everything went to plan, I think, is how it was successful in my eyes. We got in, we burned what we wanted to burn, and in the end, we kind of got to the finish line of, from training to burn. Yeah, and it went nicely. There's no accidents, no emergencies, and I was a student at the time, so I was here all the time. So I got to see kind of how it changed over time. So.
Yeah, I know for myself, the success just is seeing how beautiful it looks at the end of the year or end of the summer. What about Kristie, Erik? Do you have anything you want to say in regard to that?
Sure. I mean, just think about the last burn that we did. a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, something like that. Yeah, out in the Meadow Garden, which if you go out there, you can see the area that we burned. That was like a textbook burn. You know, we did our planning, we did our prep, we did our trainings, both with our staff and our students. We read the weather in the morning. You know, we took a considered approach, and we were able to burn everything that we wanted to burn, and everything just went really well, and that's because of all the work that we put into it before we even put fire on the ground.
Yeah, and just kind of touch on the safety. I mean, you know, we implemented and executed our plan the way that we wanted to. The weather obviously cooperated, and we need to make sure that, you know, we have specific weather parameters that we're following. I often say that if we're doing our planning and doing everything we can ahead of the time, that really the most dangerous thing we do all day would be driving home from work.
Do we have any last thoughts? Because we are basically at time.
As last thought for me, kind of to reiterate something that Erik said earlier, is that fire has been part of our landscapes for millennia. And prescribed fire is a way that we can safely manage and continue that legacy of fire in our ecosystems.
I think we can, you have some?
Yeah, just, you know, kind of my closing thought is, you know, I absolutely love this prescribed fire program. It's been something that I've been integral and I'm part of for a very long time. And I just appreciate everybody wanting to come out and listen to us talk about it today, because I'm certainly passionate about the subject. Obviously, Kristie has a little bit more of the ecological knowledge than I do, but I certainly absolutely love the planning and implementation and the crew cohesion and getting to work with new folks and kind of bringing everybody's brain together to make something as unique as prescribed fire across, you know, the 7 to 10 acres that we burned in the Meadow Garden, you know, happened so textbookly with, you know, 16 people kind of working together. It's just, it's a bit of a dance when you put everything together, and it's a lot of fun when we really pull it off perfectly.
Definitely go and see the meadow if you can. It's a rare sight seeing it once it's burned, and just thank you all for coming to see us today.
All right, well, let's just wrap this up. There's a couple of slides that I want to talk about. First of all, you can learn more at Longwood. We have great opportunities. There's spotlight tours that you can attend for free. You just need to sign up in the conservatory, the visitor area. And then also there's docent carts. So if you want to continue to learn more, which I bet that people here who are spending their free time learning, feel free to ask questions about the where you are with the docents, the experts in orchids, and there's all sorts of carts all around. And then finally, you can continue your visit at home. Check out our website. We have some fantastic blogs, not just about the prescribed burn, but also I think there's a blog post that you wrote when you did your wildland firefighting out west. And of course, all of our science series talks, including this one, are available on YouTube at our Science at Longwood playlist. Thank you so much for being here today, for being part of the science series, contributing to the cause, and just, you know, expanding your knowledge. It's really wonderful that all of you are here today. I see so many familiar faces, and just thank you for the support that you give Science at Longwood. Thank you.